Well, the next stage in putting this little mini console in is figuring out the revised trim panel for the bulkhead. Now you can see I've got the masking tape on there, and that marks the perimeter of the box itself. I've taken the original panel and marked it on the same material it's made out of. It's a 1/8" hardware. I've just marked on where the holes are, 4 red spots here. So I'll cut this one out, and then I'll transfer the location of the control panel on the bulkhead to here. Then I can cut whatever I need to out of this, and then refinish this like the original one, which is right here. I'm going to retain this for future if ever I want to take that console out of there. So I'll grab my jigsaw out and I'll cut this out, clean it all up, and double check, drill all the holes, and we'll go to our next steps. Okay, there we have the replacement panel cut out and sanded. So what I'll do next is I'll drill these holes out and then figure out the best way to transfer the location of the console to the panel. I have the new panel in place with its 4 screws, and I've extended the tape out where the bottom of the console is. So I'll mark that on the panel, then I'll measure, I'll put a line on the, a little tricky to explain, but I'll mark on the back of this new panel where the edge of the bulkhead is on both sides, and then I can measure from that to where the corners of the console are. And that way I can transfer all that information to the back of this panel, cut out the spot for the new console. We're looking at the back side of the panel now, and you can see where I marked the edges of the bulkhead on each side. Transferred the marks for the bottom of the console across the back here. You can see where I marked them on the front. Just transferred those to the back. Measured from the right-hand side of the bulkhead over, and it's 2 1/8. So I reused the tape template that I'd used to mark the holes in the bulkhead to measure for the location of the sides of the console, and that puts the marks here and here. So what I'll do now is I'll just mark these up, and I'm going to cut. I'm going to give myself a little bit of leeway here to leave room for the vinyl covering. So I'll cut a little bit shy of that mark and on either side, and a little bit below this mark here. And I know this is at a rectangle, so I'll just mark these at right angles up. You can see that doesn't go all the way up, but I think I am just going to cut out basically the whole thing here and not leave that little bit across the top. So I'll get that marked out and cut, and then we can move on to getting it covered. There I have the notch cut out of the panel, and my console fits in there nicely. There's lots of room for the vinyl covering to go over the edges, and a little bit of wiggle room on getting that adjusted. But before I go and cover this, I'm going to do a test fit of the trim panel and of the console, make sure we're good to go. Now, I'm very pleased how that's turned out. My clearances are right where they need to be, and the location is bang on. Now I'm going to just cover that panel in the same material I used for the rest of them, with the gray vinyl. Well, there we have the panel installed along with the trim panel, and I think it looks really good. All that I have to do now is get this thing wired up. Well, now that I'm satisfied with the physical installation of the console, it's now time to do the wiring. So this is my clock. This is the voltmeter. Just mark them with a C and a V. This is the switch for the 12-volt outlet and the USB outlet. And you can see the little lights here for the gauges. Now there's a ground wire off the switches. 2 of these wires off the lights will have to go to ground, and these 2 will go to the panel light switch. The wiring for that in the car is a red wire with a white stripe. I don't have any with a white stripe. This is a yellow stripe, so I'll just use that instead. So I'll run that from the panel light switch under the dash to the plug and then into these panel lights here. I will need constant power and ground for the clock, and then I will need switched power and a ground for the voltmeter. And the switch on these two outlets here will also need a constant power. So there is a wire provided for those switches, and it has a little 10 amp fuse built in. The instructions for both these gauges call for a little 3 amp fuse. You'll have to pick up or find a couple of fuse holders for those so that they're protected. And then here's just my basic diagram. I've got the switch, the 12 volt outlet, the USB, I've got the clock and the voltmeter and the little lights. You can see I got to the panel light switch, that'll be the red with the striped wire eventually. Ground wire from both the lights, a ground off the voltmeter, a ground off the clock. Clock will run to constant power. I'll put a 3 amp fuse in there. I'll keep the 10 amp fuse for the switch. And I'll need the grounds coming off the 12 volt and the USB. So I'm going to tie all those grounds together so I only have one coming out. The result of all this, there'll be 4 wires coming out of the box or off the back of this panel. I'm going to use a 4-pin Deutsch connector for that part of the project. I'll put a link in the description below as to where I picked those up. And then I've got all my heat shrink and necessary connectors for the wires that will go into that. Well, there we have the first little bit of the wiring done. I've got all my grounds connected up to a single wire, and that'll go into one end of the female end of the Deutsch connector. And I have my wire for the panel lights hooked up to the Deutsch connector, and then that's the other end. And this end will get wired into the car itself. I need to find a couple of 3 amp inline fuses. When I find those, I'll get back to work on wiring this up. For the voltmeter, I have my ground wire hooked up. Now I need to hook up the positive side, and that needs to be a switched power supply. And in looking at the wiring diagram, the white wire is switched here at the ignition, and I've double checked it on the car. So I need to find a spot where I can tap into that wire, or I can run one up to the fuse block and back into the cabin, which I think is what I might just do. That way I don't have to splice anything into the existing harness and break into that. Which means my next task is to hook a little jumper wire from here on the back of the voltmeter with a white wire up to the Deutsch connector. One other thing I need to accommodate is a 3 amp fuse, which is required according to the instructions for the voltmeter. So I just picked up a couple of these fuse holders and a 3 amp fuse, and I'll just splice that into the panel between the gauge and the plug. So all the fuse for that will be mounted in the little console. In order to mount the fuse holders, I've sanded the bottom of them flat, and I've roughed up the plastic inside the box here. And I'm just going to use some of my super glue, and I'm going to glue this one on this side for the voltmeter, and I'll just do the same with the one for the clock. I now have the fuse holder super glued to the front of the case, my wire going up to the voltmeter, and then out the other side going to the Deutsch connector that will hook into the harness on the car. I just have to repeat that process for the unswitched wire that goes to the clock. I think I might just be able to put a connector on the end of this and figure it out from there. Well, there I've got the wire going to the clock from the positive side. I'll plug my fuse in there. The next step is to get a wire, always on wire hooked up. Now I need to have, there'll be connection here, which came with the switch panel. It has a built-in fuse, so I'm just going to shorten this cable down a bit, plug that in, and then I will splice these two wires together and then run one up to the Deutsch plug. And once that's done, that'll complete the wiring of the panel itself. And there we have everything wired in. I've got both the fuse holders in, well, actually all three of them, and everything's going up to the Deutsch connector. It's all set up. And I've got whatever's going to be exposed outside, I've got that wrapped with some fabric tape. So now this whole unit is self-sufficient as far as fuses and all of that. And that part is complete. The next up, I'll be working on connecting the wiring in the car to the other end of the plug. And assuming I've got all the wiring in correctly, clock will work all the time, voltmeter will work when I've got the car turned on, and there will be switchable power to these two outlets all the time as well. Now that the wiring's all done inside the console, it's time to get the wires to the console. And one of my goals for this is to not hack into the existing harness at all. Now to run a wire for the switched power, it's going to run a white wire from the fuse block up through here. I'll zip tie it underneath the harness here, in through the grommet that's here, and I can run that over to the console location. For unswitched, I already have a red wire attached to the battery for the horn, and rather than run another wire to here, I have picked up a little bus bar or junction block that I will run a wire from the positive post to this, and then I will run a wire to the horn and in through this grommet, or even one through one of these grommets here. I can just flip up and over and in and get that down to the panel location. Now this is what I've picked up off Amazon, and I was fortunate that the holes in the mounting bar are almost exactly the same location as these two bolts here, which would be for the steering column on a right-hand drive car. So I may have to adjust these holes a little bit, but I do intend to use these bolt holes. So another plus there is I don't have to drill any additional holes. I removed the 2 1/4-inch bolts, but I've decided to go to a smaller screw. The center to center on the terminal block is just a little bit off from here. So if I use the screws, there's enough wiggle room in there that I can just place this, and I can do this one-handed. I can get that in there. So I've determined that a 3 1/4-inch screw is going to be adequate, goes through far enough to give me enough room for a nut and a washer and not get in the way on the other side. So I'll get that installed in there. Now that that's in place, I can run the wires. There we have the switched wire run from the fuse block, looped under, through it, and it's just attached to the harness all the way up here. And I've kept it on the underside so it doesn't stand out, and it goes in through the grommet there, and that'll head over to the plug at the console. The next task is to get the power block hooked up. Well, I believe I've got the wiring completed on the engine side of the firewall. I've got my power wire to the horn relay, and I've got my power wire going in for the clock, and then this wire comes directly from the positive post of the battery to power up this junction box, if you like. And one thing I like about this is it has a little cover that flips over those posts. So having this over top just adds a little bit of protection for shorts and what have you. And what I did to get the clock wire through is I just punched a tiny hole in this grommet here, so that allowed me to get that wire in there nice and snug. Now that that's done, I can get work on the inside of the car. Now we're inside the cabin of the car, and you can see the constant 12 volt and the switch 12 volt wires there. I've got the one end of the plug with the ground wire and the wire to go to the panel light switch, which is right here under the dash. I'm just going to remove the switch to give me better access so I can hook this end of the wire up, and that's that part done. You can see under here I have the plug coming out of the control panel, and that's what I'm aiming to get everything hooked up to. Here's the socket, and I've marked on where the red wire will go. It'll go into that side there, and I've also marked on where the white wire will go. The red wire will go on the left hand side as we're looking at this, and the white one will go on the right hand side. So the plan with the white wire is to just strap it or zip tie it to the harness up here all the way across, and then I will do the same with the red wire, just bring it across to the harness there as well, and then it doesn't have far to go to get over to the top of the panel. So all the wiring's run, it's plugged in. I'm going to put a bit of Velcro on the top of the case and the bottom of the plug so I can secure that in spot so it doesn't rattle around. So now that I've got that, it's time to check to see if everything works. Let's hook the battery up, turn on the ignition, and see what happens here. Okay, our voltmeter's going up, and I should be able to set the clock. Let's just push the button so the clock's wired up, and put it to the right time. There we go. And our voltage is way up it should be. And let's start the car. So there we go. Well, that's a wrap for another video in our bug eye adventure. I'm very happy with how that whole console has turned out, and just visually while driving around with it, it just fits in rather nicely, and the power outlets are inobtrusive but easily accessible. If you'd like to see where this whole bug eye adventure started, I will put a link to that video up in the top corner. And if you want to catch up on the previous video, I'll put a link to that one down in the bottom corner. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon. Click on that, you'll get notified when the next video comes out. My name is Ian. This is the Econobox Garage. We'll see you next time.